Hello, everybody. This is Naralisha, and we're going to get into this stories of Buddha. The episode 2 of Buddha stories, Reintroducing Buddha. And you will see me in a minute. So how are you, everybody? And I hope that you had a chance to look at my last video, the episode 1, in which we explore different perspective of how Buddha was born, what he did before he reincarnated, how the spirit world planned his life, how they urged him to come down and show the people on the earth a way forward. And we're going to move forward from that to today's episode, where we're going to talk about his life as a prince and how his childhood was, how he was raised. So, but just before that, I'd say hi. And just before we go into this today's episode and today's conversation and story sharing of Buddha's childhood, I'd like to recall what happened and what shook Shuddhodana, his father, so much as a father. So well, in the end, we talked about how a wise prophet, a shaman, came to see Buddha, and he predicted that Buddha is, he has the seed of becoming a great monarch, a great king, but also he has a seed for becoming a great teacher to the world. And he may find a way to free people from suffering. And in a detailed conversation with that prophet, with that shaman, Shuddhodana discovered that at all Buddha learns anything about the worldly suffering, there is a full chance that he would want to go in search of ways that would free people from suffering. So one of the teachings that Buddha's life lessons and his path talks about is to be free from suffering of life. And we're going to learn more about what he teaches and all that, but right now we're going to focus on how Shuddhodana actually planned his upbringing. So first thing, as he was growing, few years after Buddha was born, his mother, Mahamaya, she left her divine body, she left to the higher abode, and all the responsibility of raising Buddha was on his father. And what he did was he created a beautiful, lavishly palace for Buddha. I would use the word Siddharth. That child was called Siddharth. So he built a beautiful palace for Siddharth, and there were certain parameters for being in that palace for all the people who are going to work for him, raise him, tutor him. They had certain do's and don'ts in our language. So they were supposed to be all young and happy people around Siddharth. The friends, who were allowed to come and play with Siddharth, they were supposed to only talk about happy things and only about lavish lifestyle, and only keep him happy and only play with him and do nothing else, no storytelling, no experience sharing of the sort where it describes any level of pain about the world. The servants who served Siddharth, they were strictly instructed that uh, they should take his words and give him whatever he asked for in tenfolds. So he should never be crying, or never be lacking of anything he requires. So he should know that happiness is right here in the walls behind the palace. There is nothing outside. He should know that his life, his and his place in the palace is the best. And this is where he's going to live his entire life, and the life will be beautiful. So all sorts of things. No stories that talked about karma or religion or spirituality, or about sadhu or sage or monks or financing were discussed in front of him. So they kept real quiet. I believe they must be really training people to be around Siddharth. Um, uh, uh, there were people constantly watching for him, so he wasn't at all, he decided to as a child, sometimes children want to just run away outside the walls. So there were people constantly watching him, so that he doesn't run away anywhere where he is exposed to any kind of worldly suffering. And Shuddhodana was really, really precise in how he was going to be brought up. So all the teachers who came, while he was a child, they were guided to speak only about, how to be a great king, and how his kingdom is always happy and there's peace, and how um, you know lavishness is the way to life. Um, One day, now this is where there is a little twist in his childhood, and he doesn't know. So one day there was a celebration happening in the city, and the king was to participate, and all the people were supposed to participate. But then there were few people who were asked specifically to watch over Siddharth. He, because he can't leave the palace. So Siddharth, being the child inside, with all this luxury, typically we feel these other children, brought with a lot of luxury. They turn out to be brats, and that's also even Shuddhodana wanted him to be like. So you know uh, uh, but he was Siddharth, and he looked at the faces of the servants who were kept forcefully to take care of him. So he said, well, you guys, I know that you want to go out there. He was very compassionate, very kind, and he was also empathetic, so he could sense that they are not as happy as they want, their heart is in the festivity. So I want to, I should be able to let them go. And he says, well, don't worry about me, I'm going to sit right in this garden until you come back, and I'm going to enjoy being in the nature. um, you go enjoy the festival time and come back quickly, you don't have to miss it for me. And these like servants, they were so happy, they were so grateful, and they left Siddhartha in the garden, and they went to the festivity. So this was the first time in many years Siddhartha was left all alone under a beautiful tree in a vast and divinely garden. And this is where, for the first time, something sparked in him, and he went into deep meditation. And I'm using the word meditation because that's the very known way of using when somebody connects within. But basically, he was automatically be able to go within, connect with his being. And in that process, while he was doing that, um, they say the first layer of illusion kind of melted for him. Now I want to go into a little detail of what happens when we talk about a layer of illusion, or rather the first layer of enlightenment happened over there. um, So what happens is that, even if the being is, really finishing his journey, they're like really full light. And um, while when they incarnate on earth, there is, because of the layers of the earth, there's some level of illusion, that an amnesia, we could also call it. We kind of forget who we are, on a cognitive level, and what we are here to do. So uh, the one we call enlightened are the ones who kind of wake up to the call of their purpose. Yeah. So Siddhartha, kind of, you know uh, the that layer of illusion, that amnesia, was shed at that point of time, under this beautiful tree. And again, when something like this happens for anybody, um, there are signs in the nature that describes that, there's something greater happening to this person. So what happened was, these servants were out there for a few hours, and while Siddhartha was sitting, wherever he was sitting under that tree, um, this the trees had the shadow in a certain position. At that time, all the trees in that garden had shadow facing a certain direction. And as the sun would move, naturally, science says that, the shadow of the tree or anyone would move too. But this tree under which Siddhartha was sitting, and he was connected inside to his purest self, happened to, shed this layer of amnesia and illusion, uh, achieve that, first layer of enlightenment. The shadow of the tree didn't move. The tree remained in the same manner. The shadow and the direction of the shadow remained in the same manner as it was while the servants left. And when the servants came back, he was still in that state, and nobody could dare wake him up from that. And they saw this, they noticed this. It's usually very typical of us to miss out on signs like that, but these servants literally saw, how this tree is behaving, which is different than the rest of the trees. And they kind of had, um, this inner calling or understanding at that time, because they were really working very closely with him. They were connected to him, so that was connected to them. So sometimes, when you're connected to someone, you kind of get, there's something is shifting for this person, something is changing for this person, and you feel different in the presence than, how you used to feel before. And that's what these people felt. And so immediately they went to Shuddhodana, and they requested him to come visit his son, because, he was asked to report to him if anything happened to Siddhartha. And when Shuddhodana came in front of Siddharth, the baby, like child Siddharth, sitting in this meditative pose, not knowing what's going on, and he hasn't learned anything about meditation, he hasn't learned anything about religion or spirituality or anything about being a monk, uh, and he was in this state. So he was surprised, and somewhere deep down he felt like, bowing to him, touching his feet for the first time. He just felt that, that was the right thing to do. Even being a father, there was something that his son was going through, that, that his heart said, let's connect to that. And the reason of namaste, or this entire process of touching the feet, or bowing down to the great being, is to receive from them something that they have experienced. The humble we become, we have the opportunity to receive a little bit of, what they are achieving. So, well, that is what happens where the father for the first time, touches his feet. And well, that episode is over from that point, but Shuddhodana still, with all of that experience, the moment he came out of that aura, he got worried, and he's like, okay, if this is what is happening, this is what his capacity, with all the education that I've given him, the way I've, raised him, uh, things can go, the way the prophet predicted. So, well, I would not allow this to happen. So, what should I do now? And so, um, he again invited all the, ministers and advisors from his kingdom and asked for their advice, what to do, how to keep him here, and how to make him a great monarch. So they said, well, another thing which typically everybody feels and thinks that, when a young boy is, when he's married, there is a chance that, the young woman, the youth, and the marriage life would keep him, forget basically all that, that the changes that he's going through. Let's indulge him into the married life and the family life. And Shuddhodana was again inspired. He was happy that, okay, fine, maybe this is a way to keep him here, keep him to me. And so, he was, there's this word called Swayamvar. So they kept an entire celebration of Siddharth Swayamvar, and many beautiful princesses from all across the world were called in, because obviously Siddharth wasn't allowed to step outside the palace, so they were all called in, and finally Siddharth um, chose Yashodhara. Now here again I would like to remind you that uh, basically every soul chooses how his life will be on the earth, and who will be the parents, who will be the spouse, how their children will be like, for them to support in his journey, to finish some karma, to um, learn new lessons. Well, this is how the life is planned, depending upon where the development of the soul is. And this is something we're talking about Siddharth. So he definitely chose, who his parents were going to be, where he'll be born, and also who his spouse will be, because the spouse definitely plays a very important role in um, either challenging the person to uh, learn about the life lessons, or direct him. And we know many sages and stories of many great rishis in our mythology, for whom their spouses were the means to either push them out of their their lavish life, or their whatever limited life was, into something, to become something more and better. Like Kalidas is one, Tulsi Das is another one, Narasimha Mehta is a great poet, Mirabai, another great poetess, and a rishi, sage. So well, um, this is how Yashodhara came to be Siddharth's wife. And so well, for 3 years Siddhartha enjoyed the married life with Yashodhara, and Shuddhodana kind of settled down with the idea that, wow, now things are settling for him. He's no more wondering about he's no more going into those sort of deep states of meditation, and things, the way he felt are changing for him, is no more happening for him, and he's happy with his wife. In the meanwhile, they also started his education with one of the very known Maharishi, Vishwamitra, is what many of the scriptures that talks about Buddha's life says, that he was trained by Vishwamitra to become a greatest king. So he was skilled in 18 types of ways to fight, to be king. So there were 18 skills that he mastered in his time with Vishwamitra, while he educated himself to be a king. And you know, another thing that I would like to add here is that um, these souls, they learn really fast. Like we know Ram learned things faster, we know Krishna learned things faster than the teachers would teach. So the same happened for Siddharth. Like they were the masters of the moment they taught something, they grasp things and they're there. And so like I would like to go a little more into detail of why this happens. So see, these souls, they're like really 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 old souls who have done this education for many 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 lifetimes. Well, he's also shared the level of illusion that kind of keeps you separate from your previous lifetimes and previous lifetimes memory. So what happens is that the moment some piece of information is presented in front of you, uh, that past learnings come to the surface, and you immediately know how things go, and you really find fastest solution or way to grasp them. And we feel, oh wow, he's such an intelligent boy or such an intelligent child. But well, this is how they are able to learn things faster. So well, he was skilled, he was one of the best students of Vishwamitra, as we can say. And in all of this time, even though Siddharth was, happy with his married life, he was enjoying every type of, luxury. He knew that, he has everything he desires in front of him. So he was never lacking anything in his life. And yet, deep down, somewhere, he knew that there is something else lives or exists beyond this that he needs to reach to. And now this is not a very prominent um, uh, not a very prominent cognitive thought. It's a very deeper, subtle uh, intention that person lives through. And also for people like that, um, it so happens that when it's time for them to find or move to the next level of their evolution, or towards take steps towards their life's purpose, the divine intervention occurs, and that kind of changes the way they look at life, the way they do things. And I have been fortunate too to have experienced that kind of a divine intervention, which kind of changed the way I did my work, or helped me add things in the way of my work with human growth and adding happiness into people's lives. So I totally get, how this divine intervention must have taken place in Siddharth's life. And what happened, what is this divine intervention, is something that we're going to discuss in episode 3 of re sharing the stories of Buddha. And I will see you tomorrow with this this another perspective of what how Buddha's life evolved. But before I end, I want to share two things. One of the less known facts about Siddhartha or Buddha was that uh, some 2500 years ago, Buddha was the one who actually opened the way to psychoanalysis. Um, Way many years before Sigmund Freud, who is considered the father of everything we speak about psychology and psychoanalysis and about the subconscious mind. Well, Buddha spoke about it and opened an entire way to look at it, address that way in his time, in his way, whatever was required in that time. that period. But it was him who first kind of opened this path of psychoanalysis and recognizing and addressing the issues of mind. So that, and I would like to um, end with one of the beautiful Buddha quotes that kind of something that I'm inspired to share with you all, and that is, your work is to discover your work, and then with all your heart, give yourself to it. So it's so beautiful. Your work is to discover your work, and that's what exactly is happening in Buddha's life. When we meet for the next episode, which will be not tomorrow, day after, and till then, take care, bye bye, and re-listen to this episode if you enjoyed it, and do leave your comments. What part of Buddha's life kind of touched you, or was new for you, or whatever you enjoyed about this story time. Take care, bye bye, see ya.